In the sprawling obsidian heart of the Blackwood Vampire Court, where ancient lineage was measured in centuries of shadow, there lived a prince who was nothing more than a ghost. His name was Lysander, and for 25 years he had worn the mask of the meekest, most defective creature in the court, the defective Daywalker. The court itself was a masterpiece of architectural deceit, built into the deep, sunless valleys of the Crimson Peaks. Massive, light-devouring stones and permanently drawn velvet hangings ensured that no lethal ray of true sunlight ever pierced the air, protecting its inhabitants. Yet Lysander was forced to inhabit the only space that defied this gloom, a small, glass-enclosed atrium dedicated to cultivating exotic night-blooming flora, where filtered, safe sunlight was reluctantly allowed to fall. It was here, amidst the humid warmth and the pale, filtered light, that Lysander performed his perpetual penance. He was tall, but perpetually hunched, his muscles lean and strained from years of intentional malnourishment and strenuous, menial tasks. His clothes were drab, faded linen, marking him as little more than an upper-caste servant. He moved with the practiced stealth of a man trying to disappear, ensuring his every action reinforced the lie, that the sun was his nemesis, that he was weak, and that his very existence was a shame upon the royal bloodline. His fragile disguise was a lie forged not by choice, but by survival. Lysander was, in truth, the legitimate sun-blessed vampire prince, a prophecy whispered in scrolls so old they crumbled upon touch. His heart pulsed not with the cold, controlled life of his kin, but with a vibrant, raw solar energy, the ultimate evolutionary gift that allowed him to command, rather than fear, the light. This power, if unleashed, would instantly make him king, but it was also the reason he had been a prisoner since birth. The architect of his suffering was his own older sister, Astra, the regent. She was a traditionalist, obsessed with the ancient laws of shadow and blood, and consumed by the fear that Lysander's existence would destabilize their world and bring the wrath of the humans upon them. Astra, whose ambition was as sharp as the fangs she kept retracted, had used powerful forbidden blood magic to suppress his solar core, maintaining the illusion of his weakness. Every scornful look, every humiliating chore performed in the filtered light was designed to keep the seal intact, believing that if he was constantly reminded of his supposed defect, the prophesied sun-blessed strength would never ignite. But destiny, even in the Blackwood Court, adhered to a deeper schedule. Lysander was approaching his 25th birthday, the very age marked in the prophecy for the sun-blessed to ascend. Worse, the annual celestial calendar was poised for a rare, cosmic convergence. A solar eclipse of such magnitude that it was said to break all natural laws and all unnatural seals. The final devastating threat was already approaching their dark, precarious border. Rumors had spread like wildfire. The infamous Seraphina, the royal sun hunter and high priestess of the rival human kingdom, was leading a delegation. Seraphina was known not just for her martial skill, but for a terrifying, almost psychic ability to sense and root out the most powerful supernatural threats. She was the very embodiment of the light-worshipping forces sworn to exterminate every single creature Lysander was, and yet every mention of her name sent a strange, deep vibration through his chest, a magnetic pull he couldn't explain. His time was running out. Lysander knew that when the solar eclipse darkened the sky, his hidden power would either break the magic that caged him and save his life, or expose him to Astra and Seraphina, ensuring his immediate execution. The prince who was a shadow was about to be forced into the brightest light. Welcome to Lily's Heart Tales, where the deepest secrets lead to the grandest destinies. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single chapter of this epic forbidden romance. Chapter 1. The sunlight, though strained through multiple layers of quartz and dark, smoky glass, was still too brilliant for the Blackwood Court, and thus it was Lysander's domain. He worked in the sunken atrium, the only fully glassed area of the palace, a place universally avoided by his kin. The atrium was designed to mimic a sunlit garden, but it felt more like a hermetically sealed, gilded cage, beautiful, functional, and utterly inescapable. Lysander knelt on the warm, polished marble floor, his worn linen tunic sticking slightly to his back as the humidity rose. His current task was the meticulous pruning of the moon petal vines, a species of nocturnal flora that required strict daytime maintenance to ensure they bloomed only under the cover of night. He used small antique silver shears, the metal cool and slightly repulsive to his skin, a deliberate choice by his sister Astra, who knew the chilling effect silver had on their kind. He worked with an unnatural patience, his long, slender fingers moving precisely around the delicate white petals. His visible exhaustion was not entirely faked. The constant mental effort required to suppress the burgeoning solar core within his chest drained him more than any physical labor. Beneath the surface of his pale, drawn skin, a wild, golden energy fought relentlessly against the dark blood magic Astra had woven into his very veins. He was a furnace banked with shadow, and the effort to keep the fire from breaching the surface was exhausting him to the bone. From the arches connecting the atrium to the shadowed main hallways, he was constantly monitored. Not by guards, but by the casual, disdainful glances of the lesser vampires who passed by. They were often acolytes of Astra's traditionalist faction, their eyes, gold or red depending on their feeding, narrowed in open mockery. They called him Umbrae Culpa, the shadow's blunder, the defective son of the former king who couldn't even tolerate a sliver of filtered light. A pair of adolescent nobles, Zane and Alara, paused today, leaning against the cold stone frame. "Look at him, still tending the weeds," Zane drawled, his voice carrying clearly into the quiet space. One would think a prince of the blood could find a way to fix such an obvious defect after 25 years. "He is a prince of the blood," Alara countered, though her tone lacked any warmth. "Which only makes the shame worse. Imagine having to rely on the sun to heat your blood. Pathetic." Lysander kept his head bowed, his dark, usually flowing hair tied back haphazardly, focusing only on the snip of the silver shears. He let their venom wash over him as he had for decades. To react was to expose the deep-seated pride they sought to crush. To react was to risk accidentally releasing the power that would instantly prove them right about the danger he posed, but wrong about his weakness. He knew Astra had orchestrated this. The moon petal vine task was new, assigned specifically because it required him to spend several consecutive hours in the highest light exposure of the castle, grinding him down physically and mentally before the week's events commenced. Every chore was a tool of suppression, carefully measured to humiliate him and prevent the inevitable prophecy from stirring. But Lysander focused on the quiet rebellion in his heart. The fact that, unlike them, the faint warmth of the sun on his skin felt not like a burn, but like a long-forgotten, tender embrace. He was enduring this mockery because soon, very soon, the lie would end. The shadows of the inner palace offered Lysander a temporary, if superficial, respite. As the afternoon waned, he completed his duties in the sunken atrium and retreated into the cavernous, tapestry-lined main corridor, ostensibly heading towards the kitchens to arrange the evening's supply rotation. In reality, he sought the deep, velvet gloom of the lower levels, allowing the cold darkness to soothe the sun-induced ache in his spirit. It was here, near the grand obsidian fountain, whose ceaseless flow muffled sound just enough to require raised voices, that the most potent currency of the Blackwood court was exchanged. Secrets. He paused just out of sight, concealed by the immense folds of a tapestry depicting their house's mythological struggle against a sun god. He heard the tense, rapid voices of two high-ranking advisors, their tones betraying a fear far deeper than their usual courtly paranoia. "It's not just the trade envoy," the first whispered, his voice tight with dread. "It's Seraphina herself, the royal hunter." The second advisor sucked in a sharp, audible breath. "By the ancestors, why would the Sun Kingdom send her?" She never leaves the capital unless it's to scorch a threat from existence. They call her the Light's Scythe. Lysander felt an involuntary tremor ripple through him, entirely unrelated to fear. Seraphina. The name was legend, synonymous with their extinction. She was the warrior priestess of the enemy, the one responsible for the systematic eradication of several smaller, less fortified vampire clans. She was said to be blessed by her own solar deity, capable of wielding genuine holy fire that burned not just flesh, but essence. She was the physical manifestation of the one force his people could not fight, the light that killed. "Regent Astra is furious," the first advisor continued, lowering his voice further, forcing Lysander to strain his hearing. "She tried to stall the visit, claiming our treaties prohibit a hostile military leader on our soil. But the hunter's message was absolute. She is coming to personally inspect our court for evidence of prophesied bloodline resurgence. It is a diplomatic visit that carries a death sentence." Prophesied bloodline? The second advisor's voice trailed off, thick with unspoken terror. They didn't dare say the word sun-blessed. The concept alone was treasonous. Lysander's heart, usually a slow, steady drumbeat, began to beat with a desperate, frantic rhythm against the bars of his magical cage. The danger was not just that Seraphina was arriving, but that she was arriving now. Her legendary intuition, her ability to sniff out supernatural deception, was the greatest threat to his secret. If anyone could peer beneath the carefully constructed layers of Astra's suppression spell and see the fierce golden reality beneath his dull eyes, it would be the hunter sworn to his destruction. Yet, as he visualized the scant, chilling sketches he had once glimpsed of Seraphina, her armor bright with solar symbols, her hair like spun moonlight, her expression one of utter, ruthless conviction, the unsettling pull returned. It wasn't repulsion. It was an undeniable magnetic draw, a fated recognition that resonated deep within the core where his suppressed power lay sleeping. He was the darkness meant to destroy her light, and she was the light meant to incinerate his darkness. And somehow, in the face of this ultimate enemy, Lysander felt less like a servant and more like a prince. The solar eclipse was only days away. The hunter was already at the gates. The time for hiding was rapidly drawing to a close. Chapter 2. The tension in the Blackwood court was now thick enough to choke on. The air, usually still and cold, felt charged with silent anxiety, like the oppressive stillness before a lightning storm. Regent Astra had spent the preceding days cloistered with her most loyal counselors, barking orders and reinforcing the castle's defenses, not against the Sun Hunters, but against internal leaks, or worse, any perceived waver in the court's strict adherence to shadow. Lysander, observing from the periphery, knew Astra was panicking. Seraphina's visit was not a routine inspection, it was an unexpected, direct challenge to Astra's fragile legitimacy as regent. And challenges Astra handled with displays of absolute, cold-blooded authority. He was summoned late that night, not to his small, forgotten chamber, but directly to Astra's private study, a circular room carved deep into the mountain, lit only by sterile, magical lamps that emitted no warmth whatsoever. Astra sat behind an immense table of polished black granite, her elegant, razor-sharp features etched with simmering rage. Her eyes, the color of solidified blood, held no familial recognition, only cold, strategic contempt. "Lysander," she began, her voice smooth and chilling, like silver dragged over ice. "Your duties are to be adjusted immediately." He maintained his subservient posture, shoulders slightly stooped, eyes fixed on the floor before her polished boots. "As the regent commands, sister." Astra leaned back, a predatory smile stretching her lips. "Tomorrow, the Sun Hunters' primary delegation arrives to make their formal entry. They insist on the traditional welcoming ceremony, a tedious human ritual requiring a royal representative to meet them in the outer marble courtyard during the first hours of midday. The outer marble courtyard. Lysander's stomach clenched. It was the only part of the palace grounds completely exposed to the direct, unfiltered solar spectrum. It was a place where, by common vampiric understanding, any true member of the Blackwood line would instantly combust, reduced to ash and a smoking memory. It was where the true sun shone. Naturally, Astra continued, savoring the moment, I cannot risk the health of any vital member of the court. My Alpha Guard is needed for perimeter defense, and I, of course, must remain within the protective core. Therefore, the task of greeting the delegation falls to you. Lysander finally looked up, his eyes meeting hers for the first time, a flash of surprise momentarily breaking through his years of practiced meekness. In the courtyard, Regent, during midday? Astra's smile sharpened, a clear expression of scornful decree. Precisely. The Sun Hunter, Seraphina, has demanded transparency. What could be more transparent than presenting her with our most famous defect? She spat the last word like poison. You will be a living testament to our honesty, proof that our lineage is so thoroughly purged of any rumored solar affinity that even our most distant kin cannot endure a moment of noonday light. She stood, resting her slender hands on the granite table, her intent chillingly clear. You will be dressed in ceremonial black, but you will wear no shielding hood or cloak. You will approach the hunter's delegation slowly, exhibiting the struggle and discomfort of the sun's presence. You will show them, Lysander, that the Blackwood line remains purely and rigidly loyal to the shadow, even through the shame of your inherited weakness. This was not just humiliation. This was a calculated risk designed to reinforce his magical suppression. By forcing him to consciously act out the pain of the sun, Astra intended to use the psychological trauma to reforge the internal spell, grinding the last vestiges of the sun-blessed prince into dust before the prophecy could activate on his birthday. If you should falter, if you should manage to betray our lie by showing strength where there should be weakness, or if you should speak out of turn, Astra's voice dropped to a low, lethal purr. I will ensure your final moments are long, excruciating, and far from the quick oblivion the Sun Hunters offer. Lysander bowed low, his suppressed heart hammering against the painful magical seal in his chest. I understand the depth of the task, Regent. I will not fail to exhibit the appropriate shame. As he retreated, he felt not the fear Astra craved, but a fierce, icy clarity. She was pushing him to the precipice of his power. Tomorrow, forced into the full, unadulterated light, the fragile shell he wore might shatter. The solar eclipse was already sending its faintest, almost imperceptible precursor energy. Astra was preparing a trap of humiliation, but in doing so, she was inadvertently handing the sun-blessed prince the very key needed to break his chains. The noon sun, a blinding white disk above the crimson peaks, beat down upon the outer marble courtyard. This space was less a courtyard and more a pristine, elevated platform, designed to display the utter superiority of the mountain stronghold over the world of light below. Its marble surface was polished to a dizzying sheen, reflecting the light with punishing intensity. Around the perimeter, Astra had positioned her most aesthetically pleasing, yet least magically potent guards, vampires whose primary function was to look imposing and reinforce the facade of strength while avoiding any serious confrontation. Lysander stood near the edge of the courtyard, shivering despite the heat, wrapped in his mandated thin black ceremonial robes, which offered no protection. His skin was already protesting the unfiltered light. Not because the sun genuinely burned him, the magical suppression prevented the full ignition of his solar core, leaving him only with an acute, localized discomfort. But because his body remembered what this exposure was supposed to mean: instant death. He was forced to play the part of a man slowly dissolving under divine pressure. The air thrummed with the strained silence of the vampire court, all watching from the deep shadows of the castle's entrance arches. They held their breath, waiting for their defective prince to fulfill his function as a public spectacle of failure. Then the delegation arrived. They emerged from the valley road, mounted on large, robust horses, their figures stark against the dense, shadowed forest line. Leading them was a woman who instantly commanded all attention: Royal Sun Hunter Seraphina. She was clad in armor of brilliant, beaten bronze and polished steel, etched with luminous solar symbols, making her look less like a soldier and more like a statue brought to life by the very star above. Her hair was pulled back from her face, revealing eyes of startling cold emerald green that seemed to absorb and concentrate the sunlight. She moved with an undeniable coiled power, a hunter who had never known doubt. As Seraphina dismounted with a fluid, economical movement, Astra glided out of the shadowed archway, her face composed in a mask of refined condescension. "Welcome to the Blackwood Court, Royal Hunter," Astra purred, her voice dripping with false civility. "We trust your long journey from the Sun Kingdom was illuminating." Seraphina gave a curt, formal nod. "We find the mountains suitably shaded, Regent. Now, for the matter of the traditional greeting. I requested a senior royal presence." Her emerald gaze swept past Astra and landed on Lysander, who involuntarily winced, pulling his robes closer in a desperate attempt to appear afflicted. The pressure intensified instantly. Seraphina's gaze was like a physical weight, heavier than the sun on his skin, colder than the marble beneath his feet. He could feel the fine hairs on his arms standing on end, not from fear of her weapons, but from the sudden powerful resonance deep in his solar core, struggling against Astra's binding spell. Astra seized the moment. "Of course, allow me to present my half-brother, Lysander, a minor branch of the bloodline. As you can see, he embodies our clan's deep and rigid respect for the limits of the sun. He is sensitive." She emphasized the last word, practically sneering. She turned to Lysander, her tone shifting to a commanding whip. "Lysander, perform the greeting. Show the royal hunter the depth of your affliction and our loyalty to the ancient shadows." The formal kneel of submission, without shielding as ordered. Lysander felt the blood drain from his face. Kneeling under the full midday sun, while consciously trying to project weakness, was a psychological stress designed to push him past his endurance, reinforcing the lie to both the hunter and to his own suppressed power. He slowly, painstakingly began to sink to his knees, his movements jerky and theatrical, forcing his eyes to squeeze shut as if the light were searing his vision. The vampire guards watching held subtle smirks. The humiliation was complete. This was the moment of public mockery, when their defective prince would crawl and collapse, cementing Astra's claim that there was no power to fear here. But just as his knee touched the scorching marble, Seraphina's voice cut through the courtyard's silence, halting his motion with a single, sharp sentence. "Stop." Chapter 3. The command, "Stop," echoed across the silent courtyard, cutting through the high noon tension like a drawn sword. Lysander, halfway through the humiliating kneel, froze, his knuckles braced against the scorching marble. He felt the weight of the sun, the pressure of Astra's magical binding, and now the profound, unyielding focus of the royal sun hunter herself. Seraphina took a slow, deliberate step forward, her metallic armor shifting with a soft, ominous rasp. She ignored the regent completely, her eyes, those startling, cold emerald pools, locked solely on Lysander. The air around her seemed to shimmer, supercharged with the latent energy of the sun she served. Astra's polished composure wavered for the first time. "Royal Hunter, I assure you, the ritual must be completed. He is merely showing the requisite submission to the light." "Silence, Regent," Seraphina commanded, her voice low but carrying an absolute authority that brooked no argument even from a vampire queen. She knelt, not in submission, but in a tactical crouch, bringing her eyes closer to Lysander's level. Her proximity instantly set off every alarm bell in his suppressed solar core. He could feel the purity of her belief, the power of her light affinity, pressing against Astra's dark magic like a key attempting to unlock a forbidden chest. As she scrutinized him, Seraphina activated her hunter's sight. It was a sacred gift granted by the sun god to her priestess line, allowing her to perceive the true energetic signature of any creature of shadow or chaos. To her, the air was usually filled with threads of dark, shifting energy woven by the undead. But as she looked at Lysander, what she saw defied her entire lifetime of training. Lysander's skin was pale and drawn, but beneath the surface, behind the oppressive grayness of his human eye, Seraphina perceived not the cold, feeding darkness of a typical vampire, but a vibrant, almost blinding golden pulse. It was restrained, bound by heavy, sticky tendrils of Umbra, Astra's dark blood magic, but it was undeniably solar in origin. He is not weak. He is a cage, she realized with a shocking clarity. His theatrical discomfort was a performance, a lie reinforced by coercion. The pain she saw in his eyes was the struggle against his confinement, not the agony of the sun. The power she sensed was so immense, so perfectly attuned to the light, that it was impossible. It broke every fundamental law of vampiric existence she knew. The rumors of a prophesied sun-blessed bloodline were not myths. They were truth, and the core of that truth was kneeling before her, disguised as shame. "Your regent is performing theater, servant," Seraphina stated, her voice calm, yet resonating with conviction. "There is a deep, profound lie woven into this introduction." Astra's face tightened with genuine fury and dawning panic. "Hunter, you are overstepping. This is a simple, ceremonial showing of deference." "Deference is silence, Regent," Seraphina countered, rising smoothly to her full height. "This is suppression, and my sworn duty is to seek out and neutralize any entity capable of wielding power in violation of the natural order." Lysander dared to meet her eyes for the briefest moment, his mind screaming, "Run, hide!" Yet, what he saw in her emerald gaze was not the bloodlust of a killer, but the burning, terrifying certainty of a prophet. She saw him. The mask had slipped, not because he failed, but because she was too powerful to deceive. "I sense a truth here that your shadow-bound court desperately wishes to keep buried," Seraphina announced, her voice booming across the courtyard now, ensuring her own guards heard. She took a step closer to Lysander, her bronze armor catching the full force of the sun, making her appear incandescent. "I will not waste my time with this pathetic display. If the Blackwood Court wishes to prove its peaceful intent, it will do so with honesty." She turned to Astra, her gaze arctic. "Regent, I demand that the true nature of this servant be immediately revealed and accounted for, or my delegation will assume hostile deception and invoke the Treaty of Purging." The threat was absolute, war and the annihilation of their court. Astra was cornered. We will proceed immediately to Chapter 3, Part 2, where Seraphina escalates the situation by forcing Lysander to consciously confront the sun without the mask of shame, pushing him toward the breaking point just as the eclipse arrives. Astra stood paralyzed, trapped between the need to maintain her control over Lysander and the cataclysmic threat of the Treaty of Purging. If Seraphina invoked it, the elite sun hunters would legally burn the entire Blackwood Court to the ground, and Astra's reign would end in smoke and failure. "Royal Hunter, you are acting on baseless, fanciful suspicion," Astra hissed, recovering enough to manage a strained smile. "The boy is merely a weakling. Weakness is not deception," Seraphina cut in, never taking her gaze off Lysander, who was still frozen on the marble platform. "Deception is a profound threat. I have one demand to settle this claim of honesty." She ignored Astra's sputtering protests and addressed Lysander directly, her voice now softer, yet edged with an unspoken, terrifying recognition. "You, servant, your regent commanded you to perform the kneel of submission to show your aversion to the sun." Lysander swallowed hard, the muscles in his jaw rigid. He could feel the proximity of her divine energy, making the dark magic in his veins writhe like trapped snakes. "Yes, Royal Hunter." "Then I, Seraphina of the Sun Hunters, countermand that order. The display of false weakness is concluded. She extended a hand, pointing towards the exact center of the courtyard, where the sun's rays struck with the fiercest, most unadulterated purity. If you are truly what your regent claims, a defective wretch suffering under the sun's presence, you will obey this command. Rise, walk to the center of the court, and stand there, exposed, without theatrical distress or attempt to shield yourself. The order was breathtaking in its cruelty and cunning. If Lysander was truly weak, this exposure would kill him. If he was acting, the genuine force of the light would compel him to drop the farce. Seraphina was forcing him to choose between instant, painful death by sunlight or instant, painful exposure by showing unnatural resilience. Astra, realizing the deadly perfection of the challenge, instantly seized upon the perceived mercy in the command. Do it, Lysander. Go. Stand as proof of your feebleness. If you die, the hunter will have her proof of our honesty, and we will avoid the treaty. Lysander pushed himself up from the marble. His knees trembled, partly from the effort of maintaining the suppression, partly from the overwhelming rush of prophetic energy. He knew this was the ultimate test. To stand there was to invite the light to either extinguish him or embrace him. He began the walk. Each step toward the center of the courtyard felt like a monumental effort of will. The sun was a hammer blow on his head, demanding that he either collapse into the weak shell he pretended to be, or embrace the fire he truly was. His mind screamed for the shadow, but his heart, the sun-blessed core, thrummed with a terrifying, ecstatic anticipation. Just as he reached the center mark, the brightest, most lethal spot, the world tilted. A sudden, almost unnatural chill descended upon the hot marble. The sun's brilliant light did not immediately dim, but it changed hue, shifting from glaring white to a deep, ethereal gold red. The air grew heavy, pregnant with power that was both celestial and chaotic. A collective gasp went up from the vampire delegation. Astra stared, terrified, not at Lysander, but at the sky. Lysander looked up. The sky was still bright, but at the edge of the solar disk, a faint, dark crescent had appeared, biting into the sun's perfect circle. The magical suppression spell that had held Lysander captive for 25 years, already weakened by the pressure of Seraphina's light and Astra's extreme psychological push, finally encountered the immense, contradictory cosmic pressure of the eclipse. The seal didn't just break, it shattered. An excruciating, fiery pain exploded in Lysander's chest as the dark, sticky bindings that had restrained him vaporized. The sun-blessed power, raw and untamed, was finally, irrevocably unleashed. Chapter 4. The moment the dark, growing crescent of the moon bit into the sun, the magical balance of the Blackwood court was irrevocably shattered. The eclipse, far from creating the deep night the vampires craved, instead unleashed a surge of unstable, chaotic, cosmic energy. Lysander stood in the center of the courtyard, his body rigid and shaking. The air around him crackled, and the silver shears he had used earlier in the day, still clipped to his belt, seemed to vibrate violently. Astra's binding spell, the powerful, intricate web of dark blood magic that had locked his sun-blessed core away for 25 years, was instantly and fatally disrupted by the celestial event. The pain was not like a burn. It was like an explosion in reverse. The chains of shadow that had constricted his heart and lungs suddenly recoiled and evaporated. Lysander felt his true nature, the boundless, radiant solar energy, surge forward to fill the void. A guttural primal sound tore from his throat, the sound of a soul reclaiming its power after decades of imprisonment. He involuntarily threw his head back, his eyes snapping open. They were no longer the dull, resigned gray of the servant, but blazing with a furious, impossible golden light that pulsed brighter than the eclipsed sun above. On his chest, just over his heart, the intricate, barely visible, ancient vampire mark, the symbol of his true lineage, ignited. The mark glowed with a searing metallic heat, driving out the last residual tendrils of Astra's suppressive magic. Lysander felt his blood, which had always felt cold and sluggish, now rush through his veins like molten gold. Seraphina watched, breathless, her hunter's sight confirming the terrifying truth. The golden energy signature was not just unlocked, it was multiplying its power within him. Astra screamed, not in physical pain but in sheer, agonizing fury and terror. "No, it cannot be. The seal! I reinforced the spell!" "You fool!" Lysander roared, the sound magnified by the courtyard's strange, echoing acoustics. His voice was no longer the quiet tenor of the servant, but a deep, resonant baritone that commanded attention. "You bound me with shadow, but you forgot that even the deepest shadow cannot exist without the sun to cast it." The sheer force of his raw, unleashed power sent a visible shockwave through the courtyard. The ground shuddered. The fragile glass dome of the sunken atrium, which had been his prison for so long, cracked and spider-webbed under the stress of the energy, finally giving way to the internal force he now possessed. The lesser vampires who had mocked him screamed and scrambled back, collapsing into the darkness, their innate aversion to such potent, unbridled light forcing them into retreat. Seraphina's own guards raised their shields, uncertain whether this was a controlled display or an apocalyptic attack. Lysander stood utterly still amidst the chaos, his body growing taller, his posture straightening to that of a true king. The energy pouring off him was so intense that the dark ceremonial robes began to smoke and fray around the edges, unable to contain the overwhelming power of the sun-blessed prince. He was no longer playing the part of the servant. The chains were broken, and the truth of his identity was radiating across the realm for all, vampire and hunter alike, to witness. The solar eclipse deepened, reaching its dramatic apex. The moment the celestial bodies aligned, the light filtering over the courtyard transformed entirely. It wasn't the darkness of night, nor the brilliance of day, but an ethereal, mesmerizing twilight, a golden, corona-wreathed glow that seemed to emanate power rather than just provide illumination. In the center of this cosmic spotlight, Lysander completed his apotheosis. The final fragments of his old, meek identity, the hunched shoulders, the fearful wince, were violently discarded. He stood utterly straight, radiating a fierce, majestic energy. The smoking remnants of his black ceremonial robes fell away, revealing the smooth, powerfully defined musculature of his true body, now overlaid with a faint, pulsing lattice of golden light. His features, once subtly handsome, but obscured by intentional pallor and exhaustion, sharpened dramatically. His cheekbones became more pronounced, his jawline more resolute, and his hair, once dull black, took on a sheen like polished obsidian threaded with faint gold. He had been reborn under the eclipse, born of the sun. Lysander lifted his hands, and the residual energy of the partial eclipse seemed to obey his command. He didn't merely withstand the light, he controlled it. The golden twilight coalesced above his hands, solidifying into two spheres of pure, radiant solar fire. This was the legendary power of the sun-blessed prince, the ability to manipulate the very energy that terrified his ancestors. Astra, trembling in the shadows, watched her power and her reign evaporate before her eyes. "You were meant to be nothing, a disposable failure," she shrieked, her voice strained with disbelief. Lysander turned his blazing golden gaze directly toward her. His eyes held the cold wisdom of 25 years of enforced isolation, now mixed with the scorching, absolute power of the sun. He didn't speak a threat. He merely demonstrated his reality. With a flick of his wrist, one of the spheres of solar fire streaked across the courtyard and dissolved the remaining support structures holding the permanent velvet hangings that shielded the main archway. The hangings instantly disintegrated into smoke, and unfiltered, lethal, eclipsed sunlight poured briefly into the dark halls. The remaining minor vampires retreated with terrified cries, confirming Lysander's utter dominance over the light they feared. Seraphina, the hunter, remained rooted to the spot, her armored body tense but still. Her previous objective, to confirm the court's honesty, was now irrelevant. She was faced with something far greater than deception, an impossible truth. Lysander was a vampire, yet he commanded the very light she was sworn to serve. Lysander looked away from Astra and back to the hunter. He saw the shock in her emerald eyes, the realization that everything she knew about her enemy was a lie. He was the embodiment of the prophecy, the sun-blessed prince who defied the nature of the shadow. And as the eclipse reached its deepest point, the golden corona above them intensified, bathing Lysander and Seraphina in the same strange, unifying celestial glow. The weak servant was gone. In his place stood the true ruler of the Blackwood lineage, finally revealed and commanding the power of the eclipse that was meant to be his death sentence, ready to confront the woman sworn to hunt him down. Chapter 5. The courtyard was frozen in a moment of cosmic silence, dominated by the radiant figure of Lysander, the newly revealed sun-blessed prince, and the rigid armored figure of Seraphina, the royal hunter. Lysander's golden eyes were fixed on Seraphina, seeing past the bronze armor and the weapons to the soul of the warrior beneath, the soul that seemed to resonate perfectly with his unleashed power. Seraphina's emerald gaze was locked on him, not with the typical disdain she held for vampires, but with a terrifying, primal recognition. The air between them, charged with the chaotic energy of the deep eclipse, shimmered and coalesced. Lysander took a step forward, no longer hesitant or subservient, but with the measured gait of a true royal. The intense, prophetic energy radiating from his exposed sun-blessed mark pulsed rhythmically. As he closed the final distance separating them, a space now measuring less than 10 feet, the fated magic, long dormant and suppressed by Astra's spell, suddenly surged free. It was not a gentle romantic spell, it was an undeniable ancient mandate of the universe. A searing, blinding flash of golden red light erupted between the two sworn enemies. Lysander cried out, the pain overwhelming even his newly reinforced body. He clutched his left wrist as a symbol, a design combining the crescent moon, representing his ancient vampire lineage, intertwined with the solar corona, representing his unique power, burned itself permanently into his skin. The mark was incredibly vivid, pulsating with the power of the recent eclipse, a definitive declaration of a bond stronger than blood or fealty. At the exact same instant, Seraphina dropped her ceremonial sun spear, her hand flying to her own left wrist. A profound, searing agony shot up her arm, forcing a gasp of pure shock past her disciplined lips. Beneath her armored gauntlet, the identical complex symbol, the crescent and the corona, seared itself into her skin. It was an occurrence so rare, it was relegated to the oldest, most feared scrolls of both their peoples. The spontaneous and powerful binding of two destined individuals, regardless of species, ideology, or sworn oath. The mark was a sign that their souls were perfectly matched, their energies complementary, and that their union was required for balance. Seraphina stared at her wrist, her emerald eyes wide with incomprehension and horror. Her lifelong identity, her purpose as the light's scythe, was founded on the extermination of the very bloodline she was now cosmically bound to. Her entire body shook with the internal conflict, the hunter's sacred oath warring violently with the undeniable, scorching truth of the mate bond. Lysander, though in immense pain, felt an equally intense surge of clarity and possessive certainty. He recognized the connection, the answer to the strange magnetic pull he had felt since hearing her name. His mate, the hunter sworn to his death, was the perfect counterpart to his power, her light balancing his shadow. He stepped fully into her space, his newly found regal authority overruling her shock. He gently took her armored hand, forcing her to look up at him. "Hunter Seraphina," Lysander said, his voice firm, the golden light in his eyes steadying. "The universe has just overruled the laws of your kingdom and mine. We are bound. You are my fated mate, and I, the sun-blessed prince, am bound to the royal sun hunter. The eclipse revealed more than just my blood. Astra, having watched the entire impossible scene, could only stare, her previous terror now compounded by utter, defeated disbelief. The great prophecy she fought to suppress had not only freed Lysander, but had bound him to her greatest enemy, creating a union that could destroy both their worlds or save them. Lysander did not give Seraphina time to process the seismic shift in their reality. The courtyard was still filled with stunned guards and the enraged, defeated presence of Astra. Survival demanded immediate action and absolute honesty. With the authority of his birthright, Lysander firmly led Seraphina away from the exposed courtyard and into the castle. He chose a rarely used, deeply recessed chamber, a sun-drenched antechamber where the eclipse light, now filtering through stained glass, was harmless to him, but would be perceived as overwhelming by traditional vampires. He gently but swiftly removed her armored gauntlet, revealing the still-burning mate mark on her wrist. The symbol pulsed in response to his touch. The light in the room, which Lysander controlled with a subtle gesture of his hand, became a warm, protective glow, sealing them off from the court's immediate view. "We have no time for denial, Hunter," Lysander began, his voice devoid of accusation, filled only with urgent necessity. "Your bond is as real as the light you worship. Now you must understand the truth you sensed beneath Astra's lies." He began to speak, revealing the long, bitter history of his 25-year imprisonment. He spoke of his true identity as the sun-blessed prince, whose unique solar affinity was prophesied to bring balance, not destruction. He detailed Astra's jealousy, her illegal use of dark blood magic to suppress his power and enforce the illusion of weakness, and her calculated cruelty in forcing him to play the role of the defective Daywalker. Every humiliation, every moment of suffering in that courtyard was Astra's design, Lysander explained, his voice low and heavy with the past. She needed me to believe I was weak so the power would never activate before the eclipse. She needed a weak, pure-blood vampire to legitimize her own temporary shadow-bound reign. Seraphina listened, her body tense, her emerald eyes tracking the golden light that emanated from his mark. The truth hit her with the force of physical blows. The deception she had sensed was far more profound than simple courtly lies. It was a decades-long imprisonment of a powerful soul. "My entire life," Seraphina finally whispered, the words catching in her throat, her voice raw with internal agony. "My purpose has been to destroy beings of shadow and chaos. My hunter oath is sworn on the sun itself, to eliminate any threat to the balance, and yet," she held up her wrist, staring at the mate mark, which mirrored his own. "This mark says you are my balance." The internal conflict was a violent storm within her. Her hunter's core, the disciplined, righteous part of her soul, screamed for her to draw her hidden sun dagger and end this threat. Treaty be damned. But the mate mark pulsed, radiating a powerful protective warmth that countered the violent impulse. It spoke of destiny, completion, and an understanding deeper than their respective creeds. The prophecy states that the sun-blessed will rise when the greatest hunter meets him, for she will be the only one capable of truly seeing his light, Lysander said softly, stepping closer. "Astra intended me to be your target. The cosmos intended me to be your mate." He raised his free hand and gently placed it over the mark on her wrist. The instant their energies mingled, a profound sense of peace momentarily washed over Seraphina, confirming the absolute truth of the bond. She looked at Lysander, the man whose existence was supposed to be her primary mission, and saw not the evil of the undead, but the fierce light of a wronged king. The oath demanded his blood. The bond demanded her surrender. For the royal sun hunter, the bitterest truth was that her greatest enemy was also her fated salvation. Chapter 6. The tension outside the recessed chamber was unbearable. The minor nobles and guards who hadn't fled the solar blast huddled in the shadows, paralyzed by the sight of their defeated regent, Astra, and the ominous silence of the newly revealed prince, and the Sun Hunter. When the chamber doors finally swung open, the air itself seemed to shift. Lysander stepped out first, no longer radiating the raw, chaotic energy of the Eclipse, but a calm, authoritative golden aura. He was dressed in the armor he had manifested, a simple, elegant black tunic reinforced by plates of shimmering gold that seemed to absorb and concentrate the light. Crucially, Seraphina was not his captive. She stood directly beside him, her spine straight, her formidable armor catching the ambient light. Her expression was fiercely conflicted, but her allegiance was clear. Her left hand rested loosely near his, the matching mate mark visibly glowing beneath the stained glass light. Astra lunged forward, regaining her voice, thick with desperate malice. "Hunter, you have been duped by a rogue elemental. He lies. Kill him now and uphold your sacred oath." Lysander lifted his hand, silencing her with a gesture that required no magic, only authority. "Enough, Astra. Your reign of deception ends now." He faced the assembled court, the frightened nobles, the wary guards, and the terrified onlookers. His voice, resonant and clear, commanded their absolute attention. "For 25 years, Lysander began, his golden eyes sweeping over the crowd, "my sister, Regent Astra, has held this court hostage to a lie. She bound my sun-blessed power with dark, forbidden magic, fearing the prophecy that speaks of balance. She forced me to wear the mask of the weak, defective Daywalker to legitimize her control and keep the true heir confined." He focused his gaze on Astra. "Your crime is not just usurpation, but the illegal use of shadow magic that corrupted our own bloodline and nearly provoked a war with the Sun Kingdom based on falsehoods." Lysander then presented the damning evidence. He held up his left wrist, the Eclipse-born mate mark blazing. Seraphina, with a visible effort of will that spoke volumes of her conviction, raised her own wrist to match his. "The cosmos has confirmed the truth," Lysander declared. "The prophecy speaks of the sun-blessed rising when bonded to the greatest hunter, a bond meant to unite our worlds. The mark proves my royal truth and her fated purpose." He turned back to Astra, his tone hardening with finality. "I am Lysander, legitimate prince of the Blackwood Court, and now your king. I claim the throne not merely through birthright, but through the power Astra sought to destroy." With a sudden, deliberate surge of energy, Lysander extended his palm toward the great obsidian throne where Astra was often seated. The moment his golden energy touched the shadowed stone, the oppressive, dark aura that had clung to the throne for decades, a result of Astra's constant fear and manipulation, dissipated in a flash of bright, clean light. The throne, now cleansed, shimmered with a subtle, respectful reverence for his power. Astra staggered back, her face a mask of utter defeat, knowing that the court had witnessed both the depth of her deceit and the undeniable power of their new king. Her rule, built entirely on shadows and lies, crumbled beneath the overwhelming, honest light of her brother. "My first decree," Lysander announced, planting his feet firmly before the purified throne, Seraphina standing resolute at his side, "is that Regent Astra be confined until a suitable tribunal can address her use of forbidden magic against the royal line." The guards, sensing the undeniable shift in power and allegiance, immediately moved to obey the new king, sealing Astra's fate. Lysander had successfully, dramatically, and completely claimed his throne. With Astra confined and the throne claimed, the atmosphere in the Blackwood court transitioned from terror to cautious, almost stunned anticipation. The vampire nobles and guards were still processing the sight of a king who commanded the sun, but the immediate crisis now shifted to the exterior threat. Seraphina's delegation, the Sun Hunters, who had witnessed the full, violent, magical display. Lysander, still standing before the obsidian throne, turned to Seraphina. He needed her to be more than his mate. He needed her to be the bridge. "Hunter Seraphina," Lysander said, his voice carrying the formal weight of both the prince and the mate. Your delegation awaits your word. They came here seeking a threat. They must now leave with a peace." Seraphina nodded, her expression regaining the disciplined focus of the warrior, though a new soft conviction shone in her emerald eyes. She knew this was the hardest battle she would ever fight, not against an enemy, but against the foundational dogma of her own people. She walked deliberately to the courtyard archway, positioning herself between the silent, anxious vampire court and her own armed delegation, who watched her with mounting confusion and alarm. "Hunters of the Sun Kingdom," Seraphina projected, her voice ringing with powerful resonance, carrying the authority of the High Priestess. "We came seeking evidence of rogue power, an imbalance, and a threat to the sacred light." She raised her left hand high above her head, allowing the residual golden glow of the mate mark to be visible, even to those standing furthest away. "We have found the truth," she declared. "The court's former ruler, Astra, employed forbidden shadow magic and deceit. Her rule was the true threat. Her brother, King Lysander, is not an enemy of the light, but the prophesied, sun-blessed king, whose power is drawn from the celestial body we worship." A collective murmur erupted from the delegation. Seraphina's second-in-command, a grizzled hunter named Kael, stepped forward, his hand resting near the hilt of his weapon. "High Priestess, this creature is a vampire. Our oath demands—" "Our oath demands balance," Seraphina countered, her voice sharp and absolute. "For centuries, we have defined balance as the extermination of the shadow, but the eclipse has revealed a higher truth. The shadow is not evil when it is ruled by the light." She then delivered the decree that would rewrite history. "By the divine mandate of the fated mate mark, a sacred bond recognized by our highest spiritual law, and by the evidence of King Lysander's benevolent, solar-aligned power, I, Royal Sun Hunter Seraphina, declare an immediate and unprecedented truce between the Sun Kingdom and the Blackwood Court." The shock among the hunters was palpable. A truce with the undead was unthinkable, yet the command came from the one person whose word was absolute, reinforced by an undeniable, holy sign. "This is not a surrender, it is a strategic alliance," Seraphina continued, addressing the silent, watching vampires as well. "We will enter into a new pact, a pact of dual rule. Lysander, as the sun-blessed king, will command his people to transparency and non-aggression. I, as the hunter bound to him, will ensure the Sun Kingdom upholds this truce." She walked back toward Lysander, the golden light of the throne room illuminating her proud, weary features. She was sacrificing her old life, her old purpose, for this new, terrifying destiny. Lysander met her halfway, taking her hand. Their mate marks pulsed once more, locking their agreement. The alliance was formed, the vampire king of the sun and the hunter queen of the shadow. The war was over, replaced by an infinitely more complicated path toward unity. The epilogue. 1 year later. The Blackwood Court no longer feared the dawn. The oppressive gloom and stifling silence that Astra had enforced were replaced by a new, cautious vitality. Lysander, having fully embraced the mantle of the sun-blessed king, had initiated radical changes. The ancient windows were fitted with special light-filtering glass that allowed clean, warming light, harmless to his kin and welcoming to the hunter delegations, to stream into the once forbidden halls. Astra, stripped of all rank and power, remained confined, her fate a matter for the newly established Council of Balance, which Lysander had created to oversee the merging of their two societies. Lysander stood in the restored sunken atrium, no longer performing menial labor, but overseeing the construction of the Pact Chamber, a new wing designed to host joint human-vampire assemblies. He wore a simple, elegant circlet of bronze and obsidian, the dual crown, and on his left wrist the mate mark glowed faintly, a steady sign of his commitment. He felt the approaching presence of his queen before she even spoke. Seraphina entered the atrium, now comfortable navigating the slightly filtered light of the castle. She still wore her hunter armor, a symbol of her continued duty, but it was often tempered by rich black and gold fabrics woven by the vampire artisans. She had not abandoned her people. She had merely expanded her dominion. She ruled the hunter delegation from a post established just outside the Blackwood territory, constantly managing the fear and skepticism of the Sun Kingdom, who struggled daily to accept a vampire on their priestess's arm. "The emissaries from the Silver Peaks are concerned about the agricultural pact," Seraphina stated, her voice carrying the weariness of constant negotiation. "They fear the night creatures will corrupt their harvests." Lysander turned, offering a gentle smile. "They fear what they cannot see, my queen. We will send them samples of the moon-petal vines, plants that thrive only under our shared patronage. They will learn that our prosperity is intertwined." He crossed the distance and took her hand, pressing a gentle kiss to the mate mark on her wrist. The touch was a silent acknowledgement of the pain they had endured to reach this point. "Do you ever regret it?" Seraphina asked softly, leaning her head against his armor, her emerald eyes searching his golden ones. "Giving up your solitary, silent endurance for this constant war of diplomacy?" Lysander looked out at the filtered light, remembering the humiliation of the past. "I regret the 25 years I lost to her shadows, but I do not regret the moment the eclipse broke my chains. That moment, though terrifying, brought me clarity, and it brought me you, my hunter." Their union, born of prophecy, pain, and astronomical alignment, was the living proof that destiny could overcome tradition and hatred. They were the king and queen of two opposing worlds, bound by a love that was dangerous, defiant, and absolute. They wore the dual crown, leading their people toward a dawn they had both previously been sworn to prevent. Seraphina smiled, the genuine warmth reaching her eyes. "Then let us prepare for the tribunal. We have a treaty to uphold and a queen to depose. They sought to keep us apart, a vampire cursed by light and a hunter bound by sun. Instead, the eclipse brought us together, forging a new dawn for all."